For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Broc W. the President and CFO at Unleashed CEO, a management consulting firm, and the Chief Executive Officer at Gold Standard Capital, a strategic advisory and investment services firm. Prior to founding these two organizations, Broc worked several years in the Wall Street as the investment banker at Merrill Lynch, Raymond James, and many others, where he specialized in M&A and capital markets advisory for diversified industrial and specialty finance companies. During our conversation, Broc shared so many practical ideas that a CEO can adapt to scale past seven figures and build a thriving B2B services business. Stay tuned for my conversation with Bruyette Woods.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Broc, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
It's a pleasure to be here, Samuel. Looking forward to jumping in.
Most certainly. Well, every entrepreneur has a story of how they overcame obstacles to become an entrepreneur. You successfully built two companies. One is a funding company and one is a management consulting firm. So obviously you've had some story to share in terms of how you became an entrepreneur. Can you share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think being an entrepreneur to some people is very inherent, right? It's just something you go about. It's a lifestyle, it's a mindset. And I think that was the same for me. And I remember early on in my career, I would say I used to sell Livestrong bracelets when they first came out, and you could buy them at a local shoe store for $1. And they were so hard to get that I could go and sell them for $5. And I learned about margin in that amount of time. And just little things like that, right? How you be going from business to business and just being entrepreneurial, coming up with new ideas, coming up with new strategies. It's so amazing, especially in the internet age that we live in today, how you can add value to people.
And of all the things you've accomplished, obviously, like I've just explained, you have two organizations that you built and you're the president and CEO of both. Of all the things you've accomplished in your career, what is the one thing you're super proud of?
I think just doing business with great ethics and a very high standard of how we serve our clients and how we serve our team. With any scale of organization, there's going to be some capacity, right, where you might lose a little bit of that. But the emphasis we put on our team, the emphasis we put on serving our clients to the best of our ability is something I'm incredibly proud of. And to be perfectly honest, and I'm probably biased, I don't see a lot of other businesses in the space doing anything similar.
And obviously, you've had, so many things like you just explained, you're super proud of your team and the company that you've built, and you're learning a lot in terms of from your own consulting experience. You're working with a lot of organizations and CEOs. What is the biggest lesson that you learned in the process of building your organization?
Absolutely. I think going off of what I said earlier, just the team is everything. And you look at any business, sure, the leader, the CEO, the president, the leadership team is all very important, and they're going to guide and lead the vision of the company. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a team, you don't have much. And really investing in your team, investing in their growth, building a culture that people want to be part of, that people are excited about. If you can do that successfully, I think there's really no limit where your business can go.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, none of our journey is super easy, right? Grass is always greener on the other side, and we often see someone else who's having a much more successful business, and you can look at that and say, well, that's probably the reason why they're still in business, that's what they keep, that's what keeps them going. What's your personal value? What motivates you, and what keeps you just keep going and going with entrepreneurial passion?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And this is a question I had to ask myself a lot when I was working out on Wall Street. When you're working 95 plus hours a week, really grinding, going in, coming out of the office, kind of a rotational door. I remember some nights I didn't even leave the office and pulled crazy nights. You really start to understand what's most important to you. And for some people, it's money, it's success, it's fame. For me, a huge call in my life, I feel like, is to help inner city homelessness. And I talk about this with our clients. I talk about, with our team having a why that really motivates you. And no matter how late I was working in the night, no matter how difficult the days really became, holding that close to my heart and knowing the more successful I'm able to be and make our company, the more generous I'm able to give to causes, like I said, like inner city homelessness, that I just feel so compelled to try to help.
Yeah, that's an amazing story too. That I think the 1% concept that Salesforce introduced, where they take, I think, the top line from their top line, they take a 1%, and there's a lot of companies that adopted that model. And I think nothing more than private entities helping with those initiatives, because oftentimes just waiting for government to do some of that, we don't see that working as well as some of the private organizations and individuals like you who are, folding up the sleeves and doing something about the homelessness.
Yeah, no offense to the government by any means, but I've done some projects, some deals with them, and it takes a while, right? There's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of ins and outs. We need to talk to this person, or I'll put you in touch with this other person, and the government's there for a reason, obviously. But I think the private sector has a truly tremendous opportunity as well as obligation to give back to their communities, give back to their teams, and as you mentioned earlier, a rising tide truly, raises all boats. And if my company can help another small business, I can help another small business. You get this snowball effect and this chain reaction of employment, employing more people, of helping more people, giving more generously. It's truly tremendous. You start one place and the dominoes start to fall thereafter.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing some of the big organizations that we're seeing are built on a cause, like the Tom Shoes of the world, that actually has, buy one, give one kind of a motto, and they kind of bring up customers naturally because the people who kind of buy into that vision and that goal of that organization and take it to heart in terms of supporting those organizations. So I love your why, and I love what you're doing with that. So obviously personal development is an important part of an entrepreneur, right? Because we have to continue to invest into our people. We have to be always ready to give answers for all of the different challenges that are put in front of us. And we have to learn about sales and marketing, operations, finance, people management. I mean, you name it, you got to be a jack of everything, right? But what are you doing proactively in your own personal development? What kind of strategies and tactics are you implementing that in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess first of all, I love just connecting with people, right? And I think the term networking gets a little salesy. It gets like, am I trying to get something? Is there a value exchange? But truly identifying and connecting with people who maybe not even be in the same industry that you're in, but learning from people who have come before you and can really impart upon you a tremendous amount of information and knowledge. I always tell people that you don't have to fail yourself. You can learn from other people's failures. And by connecting with more people and learning about their journeys in the industry, whatever industry that might be, there's such a great opportunity to see how they were successful, see where they were in, what issues or failures they went through. And then you can really take that, internalize what's helpful, and really push that into your own network. So I'm not involved in, mastermind groups or leadership trainings or things like that, but really just having a core group of people I can lean on and look to for information that have come before me and built businesses bigger than mine or sold businesses. There's so much great information to learn from that.
Which brings me to my question about one of the businesses that you run, which is the Unleashed CEO, where you do coach and consult a lot of the B2B service companies. So talk to me a little bit about what were some of the surprising findings that you had when it came to consulting these CEOs that are struggling to scale and grow their organizations.
Absolutely. So we like to joke internally within our company, the CEO title is great, but more often than not, that CEO title stands for Chief Everything Officer. And these individuals have built businesses, they have good clients, they're growing and scaling, but they kind of hit a ceiling, right? They're, mid six figures and they just can't break that 7-figure barrier. And to us, it all starts with mindset and it starts with habits. And to truly be a leader of an organization is so much different than just showing up. We want them to show up powerfully, and it all trickles down from the top, right? So if we can get the CEO in the mindset and in the position where they're excited about what they're doing, they're pumped up about their culture, that's going to flow down throughout the organization. But like I said, so many entrepreneurs and CEOs just have the mindset of how do I survive, right? How do I make it to the next day? They don't have the systems in place. They don't have the team in place. Their sales and marketing, is a little spotty, and our team really helps, establish better paths forward with all that.
So expand on that mindset concept, because I know everyone throws this whole mindset concept, right? So practically, what does a CEO need to have in terms of adopting a mindset that actually attracts the right type of teammates and also builds a culture within the organization that's, forward thinking and risk taking and, moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it goes back to that Confucius quote that he who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right. And a lot of the time, there's just so much baggage, whether it's business or personal, right? These are tested and tried CEOs. They've started businesses. This might not be their first business. And they've made it through, that initial usually 1 to 2 year phase where it's really getting off the ground and growing and just proving to yourself you can survive. But from there, we really focus on not only showing up as a CEO, but showing up as a leader, right? And a lot of people They'll talk about management. They'll talk about, employees. And within our firm, with our culture, we don't refer to anybody as an employee. No one's an employee. No one's a manager. We have, feedback loops. It's all one family and one team. And we're really looking forward to push that vision to everybody we work with, clients we partner with. And we try to impart that same business model onto them where, have a core focus, position yourself well. Let's not try to do everything, right? Let's have a couple of core offerings. Understand what your perfect patron is, your ideal avatar, understand what your superpower, we like to say, is. And from there, we can really tailor things to reach that avatar base that they might not have been before. But it all starts with them understanding that they're a leader of this organization, right? It's not just them, in their garage trying to figure something out. They've got a team, and the better they can show up and the more excited and the more clear they are, the better they're able to lead.
So, which, I like your definition of chief everything officer, which is kind of funny that's the function that you, as a startup founder or even a pretty fast growing company, sometimes you still have that I'm holding on to all these responsibility. I can't let go because I don't have a trustworthy person to hand it to. Which brings me to my question about kind of the manager versus leader role, right? And when you are a founder, you kind of have to be involved and manage people that are right underneath you who, you kind of have to give them instructions and manage their work and check their quality. At the same time, you also have to cast the vision for the organization and build that long-term plan, right? Be the visionary of the organization. So what is that dichotomy, and when does a CEO actually go away from the manager to that leader role? Or do they ever, is there a point in time that it comes, or how does that happen?
Absolutely. So we try to get them to that promised land, right? We try to work with them to get out of, the day-to-day role. So we like to call it working on the business as opposed to working in the business. But in order to do that, there's a number of things that need to happen, right? The first one is you need SOPs, or standard operating procedures. So much of a visionary's, vision casting and dreams and goals for the organization are all in their mind. And if they don't put that onto paper, no one's going to be able to really rally around them. So that's where the first one is, just standardizing SOPs, making sure people understand what the flow and the cadence is of how an organization is operating, and make sure that's well documented. The second one is really the team building. And it's commonly referred to when you start a business, right? It's like a baby. It's like a child of yours, and you love it, you appreciate it, and you're very concerned to delegate any type of role to other people because you hold it so near and dear to your heart. And really finding the right people to put in the right seats, hiring those A players is something we focus on. And we want you to be able to trust, who you're working with, and understand that you can delegate tasks and they're going to get done. But unfortunately, with a lot of the teams we work with, they either are building their team, or they don't have a team of true A players, and they need to reshuffle some things for it to make sense. And in order to do that, it takes time, but it also takes the understanding and whereabout saying, I want to take that next step, right? I want to take that step of faith, and I'm ready to allow other people to help, work in the business so you can work on the business. But until you fully trust and understand that's the path you need to take, again, as you mentioned, a lot of people get caught in that circle, which is dangerous because then you can't be the visionary, you can't lead out in front.
Most certainly. And I think, it's also a fine balance because, I hear all the time everyone say, start delegating, right? The whole concept of delegation, which as a founder, a leader, you're just nervous. Like, hey, I'm not sure if this person is ready. I don't know how much training this person still requires. So you're always going to be their manager and continue to be on their shoulder, checking their work, which always holds you back from being that leader, right? Which is the kind of the trap that they fall into. Brings me to a question about the common characteristics, right? What are some of the common characteristics a leader need to focus on, especially to build their leadership skills and to just get out of that rut of being a manager?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first one is we talk about mindset and habits, right? It's just shifting from I need to do everything to figuring out what's your true unique ability and skill set. And before you do that, you're going to have, as you mentioned at the top of the interview, a bunch of different things you could be doing, right? You can send emails, you can set appointments, you can work on fulfillment, but what's truly the best seat that you're, fitted to sit in, and then making sure that you're doing those things initially, but you're delegating the things that other people are better at. And that's the beauty of, hiring a team. You can look at, DISC profiles and different surveys and figure out, who's strong here, who's weak there. And it really positions you to have a team that fires on all cylinders because every person is the right person in the right seat. And as I mentioned, it takes time, to get to that level. But again, understanding that's where you're headed. There's seats that you should continue to sit in, until the whole organization is built out. And then you're free to just, run and be the visionary. But until that happens, looking for the right people that you can trust. And within our organization, we almost joke around like, thank goodness I don't have to do that role anymore because they're so much better suited. But it truly comes down to hiring A players that are going to be able to plug in, understand the culture and move that forward. But I think the biggest one for me, and again, part of this goes back to working on Wall Street, is just being humbly confident. Myself, the other leaders of our organization, we love what we do and we show up powerfully, we show up with charisma. But at the same point in time, we're not arrogant.
So a lot of what you're describing sounds like the book Traction, right? That you're talking about the right people in the right seats and having some of those, core values and things like that to really get the culture going. But you also brought up this whole concept of, building a culture, right? So especially I'm assuming when you're talking with these entrepreneurs who are trying to surpass that 7-figure mark and, try to grow their organization, it's now beyond them, right? It's beyond their immediate circle of people that just report to them, and maybe trying to build that organization has maybe a couple of layers within that. So culture becomes an important part of that. So what have you seen working really well for the CEOs that you're consulting and maybe even within your own organization to really build a high performance culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And shout out to, EOS and Gino Wickman definitely has some great value there. And as you mentioned, Traction's a great book. And we actually run our business on the EOS system. So I'll give them a little plug that it's a great system to operate on. As you mentioned, some of the language we've adopted internally, like the right person, right seat. And when it comes to culture building, right, it again all starts with the CEO. The CEO needs to be in the right frame of mind. They need to be showing up as a leader as opposed to a manager, because if they're showing up as a manager, again, their mindset's going to be focused on, I need to get this to-do list done, as opposed to I need to lead powerfully and I need to show the team, like myself, out in front, and then they'll follow, right? And the key to all of it, again, goes back to hiring the right people. And we call it quick from the hip hiring that so many organizations and businesses, and our clients as well operate based off of. They see a need, right? Their time is constrained. This person might be a good fit. I'm just going to go and hire them. And that's going to help, delegate work. And a great mentor of mine from Detroit, he once told me, you get what you pay for. And early on in his business, he had hired out a bunch of his work, and he realized he was doing more work actually, because not only was he paying them, then he needed to go back and check because they just weren't the right A players. And he goes, from that moment on, I fired everybody. I took it back under my roof, and I realized I needed to go and pay what people were worth, and then a little bit more to not only incentivize him, but to truly get the best people to run the business. So there is that weird dichotomy, if you will, of revenue growth, right, versus team growth. In our opinion, if you can afford, even if it's pushing the margins a little bit, to really build a team that's going to be able to fire on all cylinders, that's a great, starting point, a great vantage point. So when you open up the faucet on sales and marketing, the team's going to be there ready to fulfill.
Yeah, which brings me to a question. I think, I hear people say hire for culture, train for function, all those kind of concepts, right? But there are certain things that, you have to have these people come with the knowledge, and you can't really prescribe every step of what needs to be done in that job function they're trying to fill. So when you're trying to say find A players, are you looking for people who have done the same job at a different organization, or trying to find people then using your SOPs to teach them exactly how to do the job?
Yeah, there's definitely an organic mix. And we used to joke around on Wall Street when I was doing some hiring out there that you can't teach someone to not be an asshole. It's crude, but at the end of the day, you really can't teach someone to be humble, right? To be someone who is willing to show up and work hard and not carry some kind of arrogant, air about them. And I think that's the baseline, right? Having a cultural fit from a personality, from a team interaction standpoint. But I think the biggest one is truly cultural fit. If you can hire people who truly understand and get behind your organization's mission and strategy and goals, I think the sky's the limit. And a lot of organizations either aren't clear on what, their mission is, or, they just don't fully understand that the cultural piece of the hiring is so imperative that they miss on one of those two cylinders.
Patrick Lencioni's book, I think Hungry, Humble, and Smart. You kind of touched on all those core points there with that. So obviously entrepreneurs are visionaries, right? We touched on the whole concept of leadership. They have the big vision, but oftentimes they fail to kind of articulate that vision and get that buy-in. So what are practical advices that you give your CEO clients? Like, hey, how do you get that vision to the team and getting them to buy into that whole vision and follow you as a leader?
Yeah, so we encourage all of our clients to go in and prepare a team IV. So this is the motivational statement, this is the mission statement, it's the key principles, and really putting this in place, not only for their own benefit, so they understand what they're doing, but to let that flow down through the organization. And you'd be surprised how many clients we work with either don't know what their vision is, or their vision's very different than what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And if they can articulate that to themselves and understand first, this is what I want to do, this is what the business is doing, once they get clear, it's so much clearer for the organization. So we're big on having a lot of touch points with our team. We're big on having meetings and making sure not only from a business tangible standpoint, things are going well, but do they firmly believe and understand what we stand for and where we're headed? And following that, and we preach that to our clients as well to really model after.
So I know when you're consulting CEOs, and I'm sure most of the CEOs that you've helped, they all had the number one problem they probably had was systems and process on how they do their job or how they operate as a business. So what are some of the practical advice that you provide the CEO clients that you have, practically how they go about building the systems and process for their organization? Because everyone knows they need it, but he's getting started is the daunting task, right? Like, where do I start? How detailed do I get into? And can this be, even written up? Because some of those things are strategic thinking tasks that you may not even be able to document as a 5-step process of doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where it gets a little hairy when it comes to actually trying to document everything. But within our organization, we encourage our clients to do this as well. We have a master systems map. So along, the client journey, along the fulfillment journey, whatever it is that the organization's working on, these are the main steps that happen. And then we delegate those steps to team members that fall in, what we call success profiles or role descriptions, and making sure those are all ticked and tied, and then figuring out where we can automate from there is a huge help. But as you mentioned, again, it goes back to the CEO, right? It's the mindset, it's the habits, it's understanding what they're even doing. We've worked with so many clients that are running in two different directions, but they don't realize it. And until they're able to fully see that for themselves, understand what is the path forward that I want to take, right? What is the mission that we're moving forward? What's the mission we're pushing with our internal team? That's the starting point. And then from there, really having the CEO just get all that out on paper, even if it's not a clean, 10-step process, if it's not a, do these four things, pass it along to the next person, they'll do 3. Just getting that, brain burst onto the paper is a great place to start. And then from there, you can continue to fine tune, right? You can sift through what do we actually need to do, what's more ancillary, and then communicating that effectively to the team is going to be a great cadence to move forward with.
And I think, one of my questions that I would have is, okay, you can document a lot of these processes and yeah, of course, some of these people are going to, look through it and do those things, right? Accountability becomes an important part of whether or not the processes are followed, right? So, and I think even we touched on traction too, like if, whatever it is what you inspect is what people, not what you expect, right? People do what you inspect, not what you expect. So what can you do from a practical standpoint? Okay, we have documented processes, but making sure that the people do follow that and that the outcome is the exact same, whether person A or person B do the same job.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of that is just getting clear on what the role is or what the tasks at hand are. Within that, I think there's some flexibility, there's some creativity that we encourage, right? Whether it's our clients or our own team, everybody has the opportunity to be entrepreneurial within the entrepreneurial organization. I think that's what drives innovation. That's what drives good change. That drives so much growth for the business. But it's not just cookie cutter roles, right? It's not we're going to duplicate person A with person B, but it's having an understanding that the team's there to support. So that critical part is hiring the A player. That needs to happen. After that, it's making sure within onboarding, within that first month, within those first 2 months, that every team member is fully up to speed on the culture, fully up to speed on the team vision, and fully understanding of what their role is. And our whole team takes so much time to invest in those early stages. So once someone hits the ground running, it's still, I don't want to say a hand-holding process, right? But there's still good touch points. So if there's questions, if there's lack of understanding, we can help them through that. And then they're in a position when someone else comes on board, right, to help them through the same process. So it is a delicate balance. I think there's a little bit of finesse, there's a little bit of magic to it where there's still creativity involved. But having those SOPs documented and then just being super clear on what the expectation is. If the leader, if the CEO, if the president, whoever it might be, if they're not understanding themselves what the true expectation is, they can't communicate that. And then whoever's sitting in that seat isn't going to be able to fulfill to the level that they want to. So I think that's really the first step that needs to happen.
So what about the creative aspect of it, right? Some things, like I was saying earlier, cannot be documented because it requires the thinking aspect of it, right? So what are some practical steps the CEO can take or can lead the team to take, right, in terms of documenting some of that thinking aspect of a specific function that they're trying to create SOPs for?
Yeah, I think just having, strategy sessions, right? So often we have meetings, we call it Meeting Monday, where my block, all day Monday is just meetings, right? And it's very tangible. We need to do this, this, and this. How is this client doing? How that client's doing? But at the end of the day, it's so much more than that. And if you can carve out time as the leader of the organization, as a leadership team, to get away, right? Focus on not the 10 tasks that we need to achieve, but what's the real vision, right? Going back to that vision, that strategy, and having those times where you can just creatively think. The more that you and the leadership team is able to do that, the better that flows down to the organization. So I think that's the first point. The second point I'd say is not being an organization that breathes down the back, up the corporate hierarchy. And at any level of our organization, I think it's so crucial that you give enough breathing room where that person can be creative while knowing that it's a trusting relationship, right? So if they have a question, they can absolutely, go to the person that they're working with. But at the same point in time, it's not someone breathing down your back in an office saying you have to do these 3 things in 20 minutes. So it's a blend between those two. But again, just being super communicative with the team, having time set aside to work on the business, not just in the business, and then making sure that flows down from the CEO to the rest of the team.
So obviously you've been in business for quite some time and you're a consultant, consulting other businesses. How has your approach on sales and marketing evolved within your organization and also from having worked with so many business CEOs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of the key pillars that we focus on at Unleashed is the sales and marketing aspect. And we're in such a radically different time with COVID, right? It's a time like never before. A lot of brick and mortar stores, unfortunately, are closing. There's a lot of government regulation that's not allowing businesses to be open. But these CEOs, these clients of ours, are still trying to survive. They're still trying to move the needle. They're still trying to grow and scale. And with this modern era, right, this new frontier, if you will, online, advertising and marketing is so huge. And you'll hear a lot of people pitch that. You'll hear a lot of masterminds. That word gets tossed around a lot, right? Internet marketing. It's kind of a flashy word. But for us, it comes down to so much more than that. So we have this concept we call twin marketing engines. So you've got the paid engine, right? And you've also got organic. So the more you can foster a community, for us, that's, with people, it's with their businesses. If you can keep them informed on what's going on in your business, they might not be coming into your program now, right? But 6, 9, even 12 months from now, you continue to drip content and keep them warm, keep them feeling as if they're part of the community. You're going to have, a fishing pond that you can continue to go back to and continue to grow your business.
Obviously, you had the privilege of working with hundreds of CEOs, and you talked to a lot of these founders, and you've been a founder and CEO for quite some time. All of us have one thing in common: we have very little time to do anything, right? We have so many demands coming at us. So, what are some of the practical productivity hacks that you have to stay productive and get things done?
Absolutely. The first one is just having a daily routine that you stick to every single day. And it's different for everybody. For me personally, I get up at 5 a.m. I have kind of a morning, kind of ease into the day, have some more spiritual, deep thinking time, answering emails, all that. So before most people get up, right, I've already, accomplished a lot and I'm very productive that early. But that's because it's a daily discipline of getting up at that time, right? It's not, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow and then 8 a.m. the next day. Your body does adapt if you're truly disciplined and set those goals and set those flows to your day, and then having one event flow to the next. So the more rhythmed you can be, the easier it is to go through, a work day or a work week and be uber productive along the way. But I think so many people just don't have those meeting habits. They don't have those daily triggers, and because of that, it's truly chaos, right? They're trying to figure out, when's my next meeting, or I've got this email, but blocking off time when you need to do deep work, responding to email after the fact, knowing your team can handle things in the interim, is part of the value, obviously, of having a great team. But that's how I like to approach it personally.
So what advice do you have for an aspiring entrepreneur who's just trying to get started?
That's a great question. I would say take the leap. And I know early on in my entrepreneurial journey, back at college at Michigan State, I was so terrified to start my own company because I didn't want to fail at, in one capacity, but the other was just not knowing everything, right? As a business leader, you think I need to know all these different things: finance, accounting, taxes, and team building and organizational efficiency. which you really don't. And that's the beauty of partnering with people and growing a team over time, is that you don't have to be the expert across anything. And from the ventures that I started that failed, I learned a tremendous amount, and I've been able to use that information and knowledge now at companies that are a lot bigger scale than they were, back at Michigan State.
Knowing what you know today, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, I would say, keep walking to your own beat. There was a lot of times, specifically when I was out on Wall Street, where people kind of told me to sit down and shut up, and they didn't want my entrepreneurial ideas. And we have a process for this, don't push the system. But I think it's that same mindset that I refused to give up, that once I broke out of that industry, I was able to take it, with my own flow, with my own cadence, and really start something that I'm truly proud of. And there's a lot of people, a lot of haters, you might say, that will tell you can't do something, that will tell you it can't be done. But unless you go and take the chance, you'll never know.
Yeah, your story reminds me of Mark Benioff's experience that he shared of when he was at Oracle. He would go to them with all these ideas about, oh, we should do SaaS, and then they threw him out of the boardroom. But now look, he just acquired for $17 billion Slack under
Absolutely.
Salesforce brand, right? So, some of these entrepreneur leaders at big organizations need to be much more willing to listen to younger guys who come into the boardroom and have some crazy ideas, because sometimes you shoot them down and later you find out, man, we missed that boat. It's too late now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any parting wisdom for our audience?
I think, like I said before, just know that the dream, the goal, the vision that you have in your heart can be accomplished. And I think with me personally, with my background, starting businesses that failed, overcoming challenges, having physical surgeries and injuries, it's all about mindset. And if you truly believe you can do something, you can make something happen, surround yourself with a community, surround yourself with people that are going to encourage you to get there, and then never stop chasing. And I think the resistance along the way, it truly makes you stronger, right? You think of the biology about it, the muscle fibers actually break down before they get built up. And if you have that mentality, if you're just, refusing to say no and you're going to make it happen, it might not be with the business you're working on now. It might not be, the next business. But that persistence is truly key. And to quote one of my mentors, the world gets out of the way for a man or woman that knows where they're headed. And I've never seen that be more true than with my story.
Awesome word to stop this episode. Well, Broc, I certainly appreciate your time and the wisdom you shared to our audience. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Samuel.
Most certainly.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.